intelligence and its source and what's prior to it, that one gets into this rather remarkable word I was going to mention a moment ago, and now it's a good time to bring it in. Here it is. It opens up one to a stillness, a quietude, and from that, out of that, through that, comes the possibility of this magnificent word, beauty. And let's see if I can make that as obvious as it is. All right? Let's take the example of knowledge. Right? Here is someone who has this curious thing called knowledge. Now, it's a special kind of knowledge now. It's a knowledge that is cumulative. It has a degree of depth that requires it to be ordered, organized, reflected upon. Take the example of mathematics, medicine, music, gymnastics. Is it not likely that someone who studied arithmetic and now claims they can know it can then pass on to geometry, right? And after geometry, algebra, and after algebra, higher forms of algebra, and trig, and calculus, and number theory, right? And so on. Transfinite numbers, maybe even get into things of that nature. Would you agree when that person, or someone who knows medicine thoroughly, and they look at someone who is willing to enter into a relationship with them and share a diagnosis, that the doctor or the person who knows literally sees through their knowledge, as natural as it can be. Right? Like you reach that point even in learning to ride a bicycle, right? At first everything has to be cool. Have to do everything semi-deliberately, and then all of a sudden you don't even think about it and you do it. That is, you live and see and breathe through your knowing. So that there can be whole systems here that you know so well, you see through it. It is not in pieces, it's integrated. Would you agree it's all obvious to the person who knows? It may not be obvious to the person who doesn't know. They may have to do a lot of work to get it to the point where it's obvious. Things that are obvious to a geometrician are not obvious to someone who doesn't know geometry, but if you go through it, you'll see that certain things about it are obvious. So that this obvious quality is what is the most important thing about it. So therefore, this knowing is obvious, it's non-obtrusive, it's simple, it's pure. Now, knowing in this way, would you not agree a person might equally be able to say, hey, look here, could you also put in here logic, languages? Is it possible, just go a step further, is it possible we can say theoretically, just theoretically, there might be at some point someone who can master many, many languages, logic, mathematics, medicine, all of these things? So that in one sense, all knowledge would be obvious to them and they would then see it naturally and be able to apply it simply, purely? And wouldn't you agree, when they were doing that, they had to go through a most delicious period. At some point in their experience, there had to be pieces that they didn't see how they could connect them. And then they must have gained an insight into its connections, and therefore they could treat it as a unity. Now, what would then be the most interesting insight to gain in mathematics, medicine, music? Right? We could talk about it. Right? We could talk about it. Now, does insight admit of degrees? Yes. If you are now taking this idea that we're developing, where you're reflecting upon yourself and looking for the source of your own intelligence, you're getting in a clear state, you're sensitive, open, and receptive, it's a heightened reflection, there's a stillness and a quietude, then there's the possibility of this thing called insight. An insight that is obvious as it is insightful. At that moment, what you gain an insight into is going to be called intelligence. Well, what is the insight that's so obvious, that's described in terms of intelligence? It's described as radiance, luminosity. It's described as the most brilliant light of being. Its effect on the person, is bliss. It can be described as the most magnificent experience of beauty itself. That's what it's like to experience the nature of the intelligence itself. Let's see if we can make sense of it. How could such an experience be related to these three terms? Being, intelligence, vitality. Well, because in that moment of divine luminosity, one recognizes that what one is experiencing is no different than one's own intelligence. And that has a higher sense of existence than anything else. Therefore, it deserves a better word than existence, so we give it the word being. It's not this kind of light. It has a total vitality within itself, undiminished anywhere in the experience. It is total, uncompromising, without variations, and therefore it can be described as being, intelligence, and vitality. Its effect on us is beauty itself. It can be experienced experientially as brilliant, luminosity, radiance, the most brilliant light of being. Any one of these words are good. Mix them all together, you get the same thing. What's it like? That's why they use the word bliss. No higher state can be considered. No higher state of mind can be considered than this. In it, no one can